All right, how we all doing out there? Today we've got a flow talk with a special individual, Andrew Marshall, out of Portland, Oregon. Andrew Marshall is a second degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. He trains out of American Top Team in Portland under Fabiano Scherner, who trains arguably the most successful MMA camp in the Pacific Northwest and arguably the Northwest in general. Fabiano is actually out in Abu Dhabi right now at Fight Island with Paige Van Zant and Ricky Simone. So this team is comprised of some real superstars all through MMA, UFC, Bellator, through and through. Chael Sonnen is involved there. He's got his black belt underneath of Fabiano as well. And I'm a Fabiano Scherner affiliate as well, so I trained under Fabiano. And my first meeting with Andrew Marshall, I knew immediately that he was a different individual. He's got a certain sense of communication that I really enjoy. And I'm going to invite him on here. We'll give it just a second and we'll get him going. And what I mean by that communication is what I love about jiu-jitsu is you really get an idea of somebody's energy levels and their chi and how that is an exchange of energy. You know, you get somebody that comes in and they're spazzy and it's kind of the white belt way, the intro, but we'll even see it progress into higher belts. People that have been rolling jiu-jitsu for 10 years and still don't quite have the communication skills to balance that chi with their partners. And what that means is there's a constant give and take, and you should always be at that pace unless you're in a competitive or performance-based scenario where you're going all out and you're going for the kill right away. But when it comes to the practice room, there should always be that mad awareness and mad IQ of how to engage these relations and understanding the characteristics of the people that you're sparring or rolling with or practicing and engaging. And my first experience at American Top Team and rolling with that team, and my first roll that day was with Andrew Marshall, and immediately I felt this connection of understanding of chi, and he understood what it meant to go at the right paces and how to kind of play with that ball of fire until you figure out how to not get burned throughout that. So let me bring this special guy on and really let's go away. Without further ado, Andrew, welcome aboard, man.
What's up, Rob? Thanks for having me on, man. I love doing stuff like this, so I was excited to do this with you.
Yeah, during quarantine, I'll tell you, I've been somebody that's, although I've worked in fitness most of my life and have many relationships throughout, I've always stayed more behind the scenes for the most part. I've had some little points where I've gotten out there with social media and call it fear and putting yourself out there and exposing yourself to the world. But when everything happened and we were physically distanced, I believe that we were more socially engaged through these platforms, and to encourage other individuals like yourself to step out there and start contributing where we could to our communities and giving back in that way of providing education and knowledge and just general support. So talk to me a little bit about some of the ways that you're really supporting your community, some of the things that you're into at the moment, and I'm just really fascinated by a lot of the content you put out there, your mindset, your disposition, and all of that good stuff. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about where you're at and the clientele and the work that you're doing right now so that our audience understands.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And I can definitely relate to that feeling of, that sort of nervousness to really put yourself out there on social media. I've been doing it, but I've also used this quarantine time to say, you know what, I got to push myself to put myself out there more. And I think that's something I've been doing, is encouraging other people too, to really express yourself, really put yourself out there. But don't just get an opinion and think that you know the right thing. Like, be thoughtful about your expression, right? Because we're actually in a time right now where we need everyone to be the strongest, best versions of themselves right now. We're in a big pivotal time for humanity, for ourselves individually and collectively. So we really need, each one of us, we need to look at, what do I need to do to really step up and be the best version of myself? What do I need to heal? What do I need to address? Who do I need to call for support in order to do that? Because the best way we do that is together with one another. It's not a solo journey, right? So what I'm doing right now is one that involves growing my business as an accelerated evolution coach. And accelerated evolution is a methodology and a overall philosophy of how we can work with people and help free people from the biggest internal struggles that you experience. Right, they're deep meditative processes that support people going to the core, not just kind of swimming around on the surface, not just talking about it, but like really feeling everything fully in a way that helps you move beyond, gain more awareness, and actually grow spiritually. So that's a big focus of mine right now. And then also, we're not able to, all the gyms aren't able to be fully open right now, but I still encourage people to look into Jiu Jitsu. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, just as a long-term practice, does so many things for us if we're open to it. If we're not fully open mentally and spiritually, it'll still have physical benefits, health benefits. You'll learn self-defense, and that's all excellent and important. But if you're really open to the mental benefits, the spiritual benefits, the emotional benefits, the self-awareness benefits, then Jiu Jitsu can do so much for your life.
Talk to me about some of the protocols you use in the evolution practices, and my outlook on how I train anymore is more for the lifestyle to wrap over, whether if it's daily function or performance. And my focus is always on the 6 essentials of living, which is our mind, mindfulness, intellectual, creative, our breath. Moving pranayama, moving life force through our bodies, our hydration, which life is born on, our nutrition, which grows life, our movement, which keeps life moving, and ultimately the restoration and the balance to come back around to be able to repeat that cycle. And I comprise nutrition and hydration into one, creating our 5 elements, and then tying that into more of the ancient Ayurvedic type of practices to identify personalities and characteristic types of where maybe we need to put more effort. And a lot of what I've uncovered is not only on the nutrition side, but I would say a lot of my practices have gone into breath practice for managing my nervous system, to be able to manage my psyche and my mental health, dealing with our nervous system being in really 2 gears of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And when we're in that stage of mouth breathing, we're constantly pushing out the carbon dioxide that we need in our body to actually unlock the oxygen to give us everything that we need, the oxygen to our brains and such. And our society is so lost on this. We know that like too much mind is a bad thing, right? What happens if we consume too much food? Well, we have the real epidemic in our world right now. The trifecta of heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and A1C counts being thrown off.
Totally.
If we consume too much water, we know that we can poison ourselves and it's toxic. And too much sleep, how do we feel, right? But yet, when we talk about oxygen, most people, the common sense is you're stressed out, take a deep breath. That's actually the absolute worst thing that you could do, because what's happening is as you're taking in that big gust of oxygen through your mouth, it's not being filtered through your nose and all the appropriate organ function that the nose provides. Now what happens is as we overload the body on oxygen, we're actually pushing out the carbon dioxide. So we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, where that carbon dioxide should unlock the oxygen from the red blood cell count to oxygenate our bodies. And again, we think of I talk about the gears of breathing. Gear 1, controlled, slow, in and out through your nose. Gear 2, forcefully in and out through your nose. Gear 2, in through your nose, forcefully out through your mouth. And gear 4 is full tilt. Bear is chasing you. It's oh shit mode, and it's in and out through the mouth. And that is natural. What's interesting is growing up as an athlete my entire life, I knew none of this. And always, big mouth breather, and couldn't understand why my cardiovascular system is always a challenge. Yeah. And now later in life, I have dealt with more anxiety and depression and different things in my mind that I now go back, hindsight 2020, and I know where I got derailed and started mouth breathing and how that has put me, if we're in that mouth breathing mode and think of how that connects to that, oh shit, fight or flight mode, bears chasing me. Now we're releasing all of our endorphins and all the good things that we want to be able to fight out. But if we're always living in that point, then it's kind of like you're just running on the same tires and the run bald and you're just running through and there's no tread left. So our society is run through their adrenal glands, all of the endorphins that we need to keep our mind healthy. But the one thing that's not talked about is nasal breathing. And you go back to ancient practices with our ancestry, and oftentimes they sealed the lips of the babies after they fed them and forced them to breathe through their nose through sleeping methods. And it's been a lost knowledge. And I know that the reason why I bring all this up is because I know you're such a practitioner of breath practice, stress management. So I'd love to hear your, because this is a lot of what I talk about on flow. Flow is functional lifestyle optimization. So how do we optimize ourselves in daily living for mind, body, spirit, and also performance? So I'd love to hear how your practices play into that, some of your focus and whatnot.
Yeah, well, I agree with what you're saying. And the example you gave a really good example of like when someone says, okay, you're stressed out, take a deep breath, and you took this big chest breath through your mouth, right? Which is the opposite of what we want to do. Just like we're saying, when we breathe in through the nose, it allows us to do more belly breathing, more diaphragmatic breathing. And that's one of the first things I teach people. If we're doing strength training, people are a little bit off-put initially because I'm like, okay, first session, you're going to lay down on the ground and learn how to do diaphragmatic breathing. And the first thing and that's something that powerlifters teach is how to breathe correctly, how to brace correctly, right? These super basic things. And that's taught in many different practices, in yoga and singing, how to breathe efficiently. And then that translates to exactly how we feel on a daily basis. The chemistry in our system. So, and I've done a lot of pranayama in the past. I've practiced a lot of yoga. I've done that for a long time, and it's set me up for really good and easeful breathing habits. Yoga teaches that breathing should be effortless, but for very, very few people, it's effortless. It's either you're unconscious of it, and then you take some of those big, deep chest breaths when you try to become conscious of it, which doesn't actually give you the results that you want, right? Or we can be in this easeful state of mind and body where our breathing is effortless, it's smooth, we become conscious of it regularly on a daily basis, right? And it's those practices that allow us. That's why my thing is embody the practice. If you're doing a pranayama practice or some kind of breathing practice, it's a lot of effort at first. You have to think about it. Just like you start Jiu Jitsu, you have to really think about all the techniques. It's a lot of effort. The more you train, the less you have to think. You can just go. So the more we invite in these kinds of breathing practices in our lives, then on a daily basis, without even having to think about it, our body naturally embodies that way of breathing.
I really like that. You touch on a couple of really great points, even with learning and comprehension. I found myself in this place working on my breath practice because being really a lifetime mouth breather, and it wasn't until the last couple of years I've really started to pay attention to it, and especially within this last year because I've had a couple of performances in some jiu-jitsu where I felt like I hit a wall with some of my just flooding my system and wasn't able to really unlock that oxygen. And what I found is, first off, you got to be patient as you're adopting new breathing methods. It is not going to come overnight, and it's like nutrition.
Right.
If you want to lose 100 pounds, it's going to take you a while, and you've got to undo all those habits. And the one thing I say is 4 stages of learning or competency. Stage 1, we have unconscious incompetent. You don't know what you don't know. So if you've never heard this stuff, our society is blind to it. And that's the problem, is our society is unconsciously incompetent when it comes to breath practice because our educational and institutional systems are not discussing it. Yet it's arguably the most important thing that we can be discussing in our adolescence in day one and how to maintain it. And then number two, we go into that stage of conscious incompetent, where now we know that there's something out there that we don't have, a skill, a technique, something that we have to learn and practice and develop. And then that third stage moves into conscious competency, where now you're putting it in, but you have to be aware all the time until ultimately it becomes unconsciously competent, where it just goes into that reactive stage in its routine and its lifestyle, and it's something that you've adopted. So I really like that you touched on that point, because those are some of the things that I really talk about. And incompetent isn't it like calling you ignorant. It's saying that you just don't know that there's something there, and it's
Right.
okay. Like, that's a good thing. Now you have a new quest. But to be patient through that process, I think, is really important. And that's why I want to touch on that, so that people understand those levels of learning. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time.
And that's one of the things that our practices naturally teach us, is that rhythm of life, like the actual rhythm of life. It's not like I have an intention and I want to make a decision, and then I'm just going to put all my effort into it and it's going to happen right away. Or I have an intention, I'm going to make a decision, but I feel like it's never going to happen. It's taking forever. It's like, find someone who's a knowledgeable teacher, who's a supportive guide in whatever you want to do, and let them support you in infusing that as a part of your life and taking those little steps each day to improvement and just accepting yourself for where you're at. I like that you talk about how there's that unconscious incompetence. We can say that where there's no judgment. You know, if we're saying that to someone out there, there's no judgment on that. It's just the reality of most people's life circumstances, is they're not exposed to these things, or maybe they just haven't made the choice yet to expose themselves to these things. But once that awareness is there, then it's your choice whether you want to take that. I don't remember in the Matrix if it's a red or the blue pill, yeah, the awareness one. I don't know, but you want to take which pill, right? So, but before those choices are handed to you, you just don't know. It's just not there. And to speak on, you asked more about the accelerated evolution methods. These methods are something that, one, has made a huge difference in my life and has helped me be able to work with people in the way that I've always wanted to. For years, I've done meditation practices, I've done yogic practices, I've trained Jiu Jitsu, I've done Qigong practices very intensely and for a very dedicated amount of time. But the accelerated evolution methods are kind of they're these very distilled, structured practices that have allowed me to work with people that have even zero disposition towards meditation, or even have ever practiced meditation. And they're structured methods that allow people to go into these deep states without even really knowing it's meditation or even calling it meditation. It's sort of sneaky spirituality, and this, kind of, it looks more like healing work, human potential work. So there's kind of three phases of it. The first is, the first phase is healing. And then the second phase is goal attainment. It's like, well, I'd say the first phase is healing and integration. Second phase is goal attainment. Third phase is spiritual evolution. And I think if we break down almost any methodology, that's essentially what it is. Like, I have goals that I want to achieve in my life, whether that be a great romantic relationship, a marriage, a great career. I want to grow my business. I want to be healthier. I want to lose weight, or I want to just be competing on a certain level, etc., etc. Right? We have all these simple goals. I want to be a better father. I want to be a better mother. What does that look like? Well, what's in the way of you and those goals? Because if you're saying you want that, that means there's a gap between you and that. So what's that gap? Oh, I just have so much anxiety. I just have so much frustration towards this person. I've been hurt in the past. I've been traumatized. I went for my dreams before, and I failed, and I'm afraid of that again, etc., etc. So what the methods do is we go in and we address those issues within. We address those fears, the anxiety, the frustration, the anger, the internal struggle. Now, once those are addressed, they're healed, they're dissolved, they're integrated, is the word we like to use, because it's not actually about fighting with them or pushing them away. It's about actually integrating them as a part of yourself and feeling them completely. Learning the lessons from those things, those seemingly negative internal enemies. Now we can use that energy to move forward towards our goals, towards the things we want to experience, towards the life we want to be living. That lifestyle, those achievements, whatever that is for us. Now, once we're on the path to our goals, now we embody more consciousness, more self-awareness. Spiritual evolution naturally starts to take place and unfold. And we recognize that success is not the key to happiness, but happiness is the key to success. And when that switch happens, when we get all the other shit out of the way and we're not focusing on that, now life begins. So that's what I do with my clients.
I like that. It goes back to a lot of, my more rudimentary description, which is mind-body connection and developing spirit being the culture between the two. And that spirit comes alive as you find happiness within mind and body. And that's that harmonic relationship that you ultimately develop with yourself. I find that this lifestyle of living conscious awareness and such and intentional practices, so much of it just comes down to first off your relationship with yourself. But I see a hard line in the sand where most people are harmonic or compulsive, and compulsion can be great for setting up those initial stages of commitments and engagement and goal setting and such to develop the habits, the pattern forming habits. The key is habitual development, and you just touched on that. The integration process is developing those habits that become routine, that are the new loops in your programming. And we have to go back, and you talked about some of the traumatizing things that kind of lock memory into us, whether if it's in our tissues, all through our brain or our gut or our heart. I believe in these memories being locked and scars, and ultimately it's embedded, and that photo is caught in that loop, and until you can start to skip that loop and unprogram the bullshit, and that's that initial foundation that you talked about, unwiring all the stuff that you've been wired up with to find a clean slate to go forward. It's much of recently, I've worked in so many different realms of fitness with bodybuilding and powerlifting and Olympic lifting and strongman and CrossFit. And I've just really enjoyed, I'm 80, call it ADD. I call it a fuck ton of energy. And I love to learn. It's for me, the day that I stop learning and the day that I'm no longer a student is the day I'm 10 feet in the ground or wherever, and my spirit is finally where it needs to be. But so much of this for me has been about that constant quest for more and more and more. And as I've come down to it, it's like I've stripped all of those things away, and I've just found this lack of need for so many of those tools or so many of those outlets of like aggressive hammering myself, because I have a much better relationship inside. And I found more presence and harmony in this relationship where I intentionally want to eat foods that give back to me. I intentionally want to think only positive thoughts that attract more positivity to my life. I only want to consume organic foods and things that clean my gut so I can have more clarity and peace of mind. And as I've gotten, as I've progressed or matured, I'll say, not aged, but matured in my in this skin bag that I walk around in, I've come to realize that the spirit is what really needs to be focused on, but you're never going to find that unless you get your mind and your body in check. So those are many of my recent experiences, and so I think that's why I've really gravitated towards you, because the work you're putting out there for mental health and stress management and all of these things, it is really important during this time. And I'll just say this. At the very beginning of quarantine, I said the real epidemic pandemic, epidemic coming is the mental health and the brain. My friend hopped on here, certified health nut. He talks about the brain virus that's out there, and that's a lot of the bullshit programming and the stuff that's going on in our world. No matter what your belief is with all the corona, and there's a ton of media is just fear mongering, and it's insane right now. But sorry, monster truck driving by. But I just got a message 2 days ago, the first one that I've got like this, and I hate to say it, but I've kind of been expecting them. Former coach that worked for me, one of my former kind of proteges, relapsed and was clean. I helped him kind of get clean and helped him get his life into fitness and turn his addiction from drugs and alcohol to this holistic fitness lifestyle. And what kept him moving every day was going to work and serving other people. And when it came down to lockdown, he got isolated. He was too afraid. He had those insecurities and fears to go out and continue to serve his purpose that gave him that return, that addiction, that feed that he needed, and relapsed and OD'd and passed away. And it's so hard to hear that stuff, but it's also I hate to say this, it's an expectation of mine at this point that we're going to start to hear more and more about issues that are rising through all of this, from the economical collapses causing the mental health, domestic violence issues, drugs. We're going to see more and more of the same pop up through all of this. So what are some of the things that for somebody that's more isolated and really maybe they do have a true high risk health concern, whatever your belief is on corona, COVID, whatever, what are some of the things that you suggest for those people to keep themselves active, keep themselves healthy and busy, and what are some basics that they can do in their own home?
Well, my first thought is not necessarily right in your own home, but it's still something that's more isolated from other people. Is you can still get out in nature. You can still go for a drive, go find a hike. If you're really concerned about COVID or you're higher risk of COVID, and if you have the ability to go out for a hike, it's super important. Getting out in nature. I think that's what I initially, when this started and we couldn't go to the gym, I was like, okay, well, it's time to get out in nature. It's time to be outside, right? So that's number one, if you're able to do that. If you're not able to go out to the hike, you don't have a car to drive out of the city or something, get out in your yard. If you don't have a yard, go for a walk around the neighborhood. There's still plenty of social distancing you can do going for a walk around the neighborhood. If you're really worried about it, wear a mask while you walk around your neighborhood, but just get outside. Step out on your porch, step outside your front door, be outside. Be around plants. Be around moving water. Get your face in the sun. If it's nighttime, step outside and listen. Just listen to the night. Notice what you hear. So that's my first thing, is step outside the house. Second thing, if you're in the house, there's just a plethora of online exercise stuff that you can find. Just go on YouTube. If you don't want to pay for something, just YouTube, like body weight circuit workout, right? If you need to get a workout, there's all that stuff is infinite now. So you can go online and find these things. If you want to learn more about how you can eat healthy while you're at home, YouTube nutritional advice, get some books, look them up, read, just put positive things in front of your face, right? Don't spend a bunch of time playing video games and watching TV and just like, okay, what is positive that I can put in front of my face? Who can I call right now to talk to, have some Zoom, just using Zoom, or even most smartphones, you can just do a video call, do more video calls, do more Zoom calls. I did I wish I would have done it more over the past few months, but we did do it once where I got together with some of the jiu-jitsu brothers from the gym, and we had like 10 of us on a Zoom call just hanging out. There was no agenda. We're just like, let's just hang out. And each guy brought like a different, kind of beer that they really like, and we sat and we had a beer on Zoom.
That's awesome.
So stuff like that, you can get creative, right? Be creative. I know that there's even more difficult situations out there, like say if there's people at home with an abusive partner and you got to stay home. That's a really tough situation. And I would just say, if you have an abusive partner at home, first of all, you need to call someone about that. You don't have to be there with that person. There's ways you can get out of that situation, even if it feels hopeless. So there's always ways we can be creative, and if we don't know what to do, there's plenty of times in life where it's like, I don't know the answer, I don't know what to do, so I try to think of someone in my life who might be able to help me take a step, and I call that person, and they help me be creative, or they have the wisdom, someone, an elder, mentor, or just someone in your life that you feel like could offer a good suggestion or offer a good strategy. I think being creative that way is really important.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I like one point that you made in there, and originally when we were talking about this call, one of the things we talked about was the evolution of modern man and what man means, and manhood, and I think through history it was be the alpha, be the dominant, this intense, full driven, and that was the direction of Western society. And I think as we're turning through some of this turning point in our world, I've done a couple of calls with some of my friends that are into the astrology side of things, and a great friend of mine has been talking about some of these things that have happened for a year prior to coming ahead, and it's just been the pivotal changes with some of the planetary alignments and the things that are happening, and whether if you believe in that stuff or not, there's some true alignments that, and if you don't, that's fine, but there are a lot of signs that are pointing in certain directions, and with that is we're moving into a different era that drives more of a spiritual connection with people. And I think our world in general is going there. You're seeing marketing going in that direction. Yeah. Everything from nutrition has been for a while. I take that into supplementation, fitness, lifestyle, the commercialization of yoga, and even the meditation stuff that we've talked about. I know in some of my past more alpha type of mentalities, I was like anti-yoga, or like I'm not, I can't do this chanting thing or whatever. And it took me to be broken down to really rebuild up into that and find that side. But being in touch with, being driven to be successful, and however you define that, but having the balance of compassion and love, and being a love leader versus a cut your throat leader, and so I think some of those Western ways are being exposed and for what they are, and there's this new evolution of man that's coming out that is more in touch with themselves, number one, so that they don't have to put up the insecure fronts, and just being genuinely real and intuitive with the present moment and the people that you're with. And I think as we're so forward all the time, as our society has been, it puts us into that stage of kind of alpha, well, I don't know if this is even a word, but alphaism, that is like this culture that has been bred through this stuff: eat more bacon, grab more guns, and let's, again, whereas I think there's more of a control and a balance in the yin and yang, and you're a guy that I really see as more of what I would classify as an omega type of man that is in touch with himself. So talk to me a little bit about some of your feels on that topic.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, I love what you're saying about that. And we're kind of consistently stuck in thinking about things in a way of like there's either this soft side or this hard side.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So looking at yoga and saying, oh, that's so soft, that soft side, the compassion, the love, the feelings, the intimacy, I think of like eye gazing and vulnerability and and then there's the other side of like, not being open to that, just being strong, just being goal oriented, just being more masculine, right? And being in control of your life, right? Having your views and sticking to them, kind of thing. But I think if we look at when someone's a fully integrated and mature individual, especially men, when you're embodying true love and compassion, right? Everyone's on a journey. As that evolves, it might start out a little softer, but when you embody true love and compassion, the people that embody that are the strongest people. Because like what am I trying to say?
I think of it like this: you have the strength for the moment, and I think there are times where the intensity needs to be there, but there are also times that love is strength, and even admitting faults or being able to expose yourself can, in the past, would be maybe considered weak, whereas I think being more emotionally out there and putting yourself in a place of vulnerability actually shows some real strength, and to be able to step up and to be able to do that stuff. So I think there's a time and a place where, love or that intensity to fight or whatever that is, both have their place and value in whatever that present scenario or situation is.
Yeah, I think there's a wisdom of knowing when to use what, and I think that comes from a maturation process, and that anyone who's made a big impact in human history, any man who is truly influential person in a very positive and good way, has practices in their life that they're doing on a daily basis. And that's what cultivates their maturity and their wisdom. Right? And a fully matured, compassionate, loving, and strong man is very far from frail. There's like very little frailty in a person like that. But anyone who's just trying to be strong and is just shutting out love and compassion, they're trying not to be frail, but they're extremely frail. As if their guard breaks down, if their shield breaks down, if their walls break down, what's behind that? But when you're in tune with love, and you're in tune with yourself, and you're strong mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, you have the ability to experience the full spectrum of the human experience without crumbling, budging, or moving one bit. You're just fully present right there, willing and able to feel it all without going soft, as we think of it, right? And I think that's the integrated man. That's what I see. My mentor used the term that I really like. It says the benevolent alpha. So there's kind of the initial old idea of the alpha, and then we can evolve into a benevolent alpha, an individual who's a conscious man that knows that his role is to serve and uplift others, not to have others serve him. We all need a degree of give and take, but if I mature into myself and my mission and my path, and I strengthen myself physically, and I like to be strong physically, but I also make sure I'm strong mentally and emotionally and spiritually, and if I'm really living into my purpose is to serve others, and that gives me strength. And from that place, I offer leadership. From that place, I say the things that I know will support others from a place of wisdom, from a place of deep care, And I see that as being the benevolent alpha.
I like that. Yeah, and that's we touch on. You touched on a couple pieces, the qualities of our brain, and we have our intellectual qualities, our IQ, we have our physical qualities, we have our spiritual qualities, and we have our emotional qualities, and being able to, and we're seeing more of our even like corporate world starting to value more of those emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence, and that connection to other people to lead people. And intelligence will help you in more of the management side of business or life or whatever. Whereas I think these other values, spiritual and emotional qualities, will lead more towards that leadership side. And the difference in managing a process and leading people versus managing people and leading the process, and in understanding where your qualities come in, and maybe where you might be more shallow in one than the other, and you need to work on that to lift it into more balance. And that constant evolution is a key piece. And for me, it doesn't matter where you're at in life. It's the practice that makes the progress, and are you intentionally living that? And I'll never judge somebody based on where they're at and their weight or their their lifestyle or whatever. Where I start to judge is, you made the comment earlier, once we have the knowledge and then we decide to not do anything with that, is where we, and then if we say anything about that, like I wish or whatever, that's where I start to come in and start firing off. And even seeing some of the stuff in today's society where, I've got people lighting up on masks, people not lighting people up over not wearing masks. Yeah, I see them shoving cheeseburgers down their neck hole. And and life is about balance. And I'll eat that stuff to some degree. And I do to feed my emotions. So earlier I said, I mentioned I only consume things, whether if it is mental or physical or spiritual, based on what's going to serve me in that present moment the best, and also at the same time setting myself up for future progress. And sometimes for me, it's I was born and raised on the pizza diet on Friday nights, and that was like my routine, and that's kind of like at times my spoiling sanity food. And what's interesting is it kicks me back into a really even better routine right afterwards, because I got this stimulus and this reward, and I feel great, and I go right back to it the next day, and I'm back in gear. But I think a lot of people struggle with the balance in that, and how to reward yourself, but then how to get right back on the horse. And I call it the 80-20 lifestyle. If you can really practice 80% with embodying the practice, then the other 20% will just take care of itself in the long run.
Totally. Yeah. And trying to be too rigid with yourself will only backfire.
Yeah.
I think everyone experiences that at some point in their journey. So you're right. It's finding that balance, and when we talk about discipline, not thinking of discipline as something that is like locking you down and forcing yourself to do something. Discipline, when we take disciplined actions, those are actions that we take to allow ourselves to experience more freedom. Discipline is not an action of restriction. It's an action because we're choosing to experience more freedom. It might be challenging at first because you're used to doing something else, and you have to use a little more discipline and willpower to not do that thing because you're switching to another rhythm, another way of being. But once you're in that groove, it's something that gives you more freedom, and that's why we do it. So discipline in a lighter way, and getting accountability buddies, and realizing that, I'm making this choice so that I can be free, not restricted.
Yeah, I think I love that you touch on that, because discipline creates systematic efficiency, and that ultimately frees up efficiency. Will always free up more time and energy for you. So by initially, I go back to, again, those 4 stages of competency and what that means. And initially, it may be a chore and it may be a task, but ultimately, as you've rewired and reprogrammed yourself, it sets more freedom for yourself through that efficiency. And it's no different than having a business that's set up on systems versus one that's not. It's just what's happening today. I don't know, So, and that comes back to that intentional living and being consciously aware of trying to find the right steps. And if you don't have them, being able to seek it out. And that comes back to, I'm going to swirl back around to that whole, what I call the Omega man, or the modern man, and being able to drop the ego to be able to pick up the phone and make the call when you need to, and being able to identify, even being able to, let's back up one more step, self-identify when these things are coming up, and having enough security in yourself that you can actually admit those challenges or issues, and then be able to take that next step. And I know you have through your story grew up kind of a little bit rougher and had to find some points where you turned to things that really helped you. So I know we're backtracking here a little bit, but we'll kind of finish the call with this, which is interesting how it's come back around. But your story of how you found Jiu Jitsu and yoga, and talk to me a little bit about that, because I think it plays into all of this, and we'll kind of wrap it up here.
Yeah, so in many ways, I had a lot of freedom growing up, which was cool, and I'm really grateful for that. But what was also in my life a lot was intense insecurities, intense unhealthy habits, and a lot of violence and anger and internal struggle that came from that. By the time I was 16, my favorite thing to do was get drunk. Like, I knew I would say that to myself. I'm like, I just love being drunk. It's all I want to do is drink. And obviously that's indicative of a lot of emotional imbalance when I'm not drunk, right? And when I am drunk, right? Getting in crazy drunk fights, hurting myself, hurting other people. And by the time I was 20, I grew up playing a lot of sports. I was an athlete, so I got really into football for 6 years, from 7th grade till a senior in high school. I was just all about football. And when I wasn't playing football, my friends and I were either fighting each other, or we were getting drunk and getting in fights with other people. And I felt like if some guy looked at me wrong, I had to prove myself and kick his ass in the hallway or at the party, or which, inevitably things escalating to even more crazy situations. But by the time I was 20, I felt like I was 60, just in the pain pill. And I ate fast food. I probably ate Taco Bell and Wendy's were my 2 meals of the day, like almost every day. I probably drank 6+ Dr. Peppers a day. So my friends and I would hang out and drink big 24 packs of soda during the day, and we drink 24 packs of beer at night, and we'd eat fast food and never thought a thing about it, right? And I'd wonder why every morning I'd wake up feeling like shit, not understanding why. And I thank God for sports, because I would have been so diabetic, and just like that's what kept me at least lean and healthy, and being a young guy, just always active along with all that stuff. So by the time I was 20, just feeling like I was 60, like chronic back pain, my body hurt, I was angry all the time, I was depressed, I was insecure, and I just was like, finally I became sick of myself. I became sick enough of myself that I was like, I can't keep living like this. I got to do something about it. And it was jiu-jitsu that helped me gain that awareness. And because growing up, you just randomly in shows or wherever you see these images of martial artists meditating. You see like the monk martial artist meditating. And I started thinking, well, now I train Jiu Jitsu, and I've seen these images of martial artists meditating. What's this meditation thing about? So it was something clicked in me, and then I said, I'm going to try that out. And I started 5 minutes a day meditating. And then I started reading more books about spirituality that really just opened my mind. I grew up Christian too, and none of that made any sense to me. And so I started opening up spiritually when I was a young adult. And putting all of that together just over time, got in that more and more, made some more shifts, started reading about nutrition. Like, okay, if I want to be an athlete, I also need to study nutrition so that I can perform the best, because I wasn't studying nutrition before. And, pro athletes, they've got nutritionists. I can't afford a nutritionist, so I better figure it out myself. So just starting to educate myself around all of that. And as I stepped forward educating myself, other teachers and mentors and coaches started showing up in very synchronistic ways. And ever since then, it's just been the journey that I'm on, is finding that balance around healing and how to actually experience the life I want to be experiencing, and how to evolve spiritually.
You talked about sports saving lives, and again, I go back to the future pandemics that we're going to see through these lockdowns and shutting down sports and essential practices for health and well-being, like gyms and jiu-jitsu and all of these pieces, where to me it's a challenge. I think if people, I'll tell you, in the past, I was the guy that would be like, what we should do, we should tax cigarettes and alcohol and fast food and overtax them. And instead, and through this pandemic, I've really opened my eyes more in my brain more to, I want less mandates. I want less control and restriction by our government, and more choice, freedom of choice for people to make the decision to go a certain place or not. And those who maybe are more high risk and vulnerable need to stay home. And if the gym is a place that you don't feel comfortable, then it's not a place that you go. And obviously protocol and all of that good stuff is great to keep the acceleration and the growth of Corona down and whatnot. But I'm really concerned about the future mental health of our society in general on this planet, when you take away all of these outlets for mental, emotional, physical stresses, and I know for me, I have a really similar type of background, and grew up as a martial artist and wrestler, and really aggressive and intense, and a lot of anger, and went into the military as well, and turned some of that intensity in there. And I found meditation. I was 17 when 16, 17 when I found my meditation practices. I was trained by Jay Robinson. He was the head coach of, for many years, of University of Minnesota wrestling team. And I spent a month at a training camp at the University of Minnesota, and Jay Robinson every single night would walk us through practice of meditation, and really set the tone and the path for the rest of my life. And that was a huge driving force, and what's helped me kind of maintain much of my mental balance. And I've always found that meditation as my kind of practice and escape. So obviously it's turning more mainstream now, as we discussed. Are there any particular outlets that you would suggest maybe some of our listeners here to go to, places that they can find practices that might be a good entry point for meditation without being too overwhelmed by the spiritual side?
Yeah, and I love what you just shared there. Just you had one wrestling coach as a teenager, right? taught you meditation, had you in routine, and it's made a huge difference for you the whole rest of your life, right? That just speaks to that right there. You just need that one person, especially, if we have good mentorship for teenagers, right, that are introducing them to those kinds of things. Some may take to it, some may not, but you just have to give people that little glimpse, and then it'll affect them for the rest of their life. Even if they don't think about it for 10 years, they'll come back to it and be like, oh yeah, that, the current Dalai Lama said if you taught every 8-year-old how to meditate, there would be no more violence in the world. And obviously that's not like a scientific statement, but I feel it. I believe it because I've been a long time meditator. I understand why he's saying that, and he understands why he's saying that, and it's a real thing. And it's about self-awareness, and it's about the acceptance of self. Anyone who's out there harming someone else or judging someone else or being critical of someone else is experiencing a lack of acceptance of who they are. And meditation allows us to come to the awareness of what we struggle with, what we feel good about, what we feel bad about. And you know what? Say, I accept that about myself. I accept where I'm at, and I'm going to live from this moment forward. Probably every few days, I hit a moment where I go, okay, this is where I'm at, and I'm living from this moment forward. And it's not something you just do. You don't just say, I accept Jesus, and then for the rest of your life, you're saved. You make that choice on a regular basis to live from now forward. And that's an important thing. So you talk about people looking for a place to start. My first answer, which is sort of offline from what you're saying, but it's look for the resolve within yourself to live from this moment forward, to accept where you've come from, to accept where you're at, and to live from this moment forward to the best of your ability. Find that resolve and that dedication and that perseverance. The other thing is, I personally really love Wim Hof. I think the work that he does in the world is amazing. He's a hilarious guy. He's a spontaneous, very free, very wild guy. I think he's an excellent person to go to initially because his practices are very simple and very effective. And he's fun to listen to. He's not like sitting over here acting all like super spiritual. He's just being himself, So he's a very powerful person to tune into. Other practices, go to your local yoga studio. You could try out. Most yoga studios have free trials. You can go try around a bunch of different ones if you're wanting to get more of a spiritually focused practice. See how that is for you. There's so many free things you can do online if you want to find a meditation.
Are there any particular types of yoga that you would recommend more for the meditative side over more the physical?
I think the physical is a good place to start, like a good hatha yoga, because that's going to be a little better for your body and allows you, it creates the stability and the flexibility in your body to allow you to relax mentally, to go into meditation. But if you want to go into straight into deeper meditative practices, Raja Yoga is sort of more about that meditative practices. There's a great teacher, Paramahansa Yogananda, who started Self-Realization Fellowship. There's one in Portland. There's one in almost every city. You could go to a Self-Realization Fellowship service. It is, at times, it can be more out there, so to say, from like the normal way of thinking. But it's great, simple, deeply meditative practices. So that's something I've been exposed to. Qigong is a great, gentle, physical practice that allows you to go deep mentally. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That's what I was looking for, we're counting down here. We've got about 30 seconds left on our countdown, but I really want to touch on that because there's so many different versions of yoga. I'm traditionally trained in Hatha, but I have touched on through my training many other outlets like Kundalini and some of these other pieces, but some of those can be a little intense on the spiritual side. So I also make the same recommendation: go to a Hatha, Vinyasa, break your body down, and that'll ultimately break your mind down and connect that spirit as we talked about. So Andrew, once again, appreciate you, man.